Welcome to Manga Stories Complete Story Series. Today we'll be covering Berserk, chapters 64 to 69. All alterations to the panel text and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. At the end of our last chapter, Guts and the Hawks are being chased by Waleed and his Black Dog Knights. During their battle, Guts began to get the same feeling as when he first ran into Zod, right after Waleed transformed into a monstrous beast in front of him. A second mouth on Waleed's chest begins to open, and Guts stares at it. This feeling, it's like he felt before, just like when he faced against Zod. The soldiers all begin to panic thinking Zod has returned, but Judo tells them no, this one is different from Zod. Waleed grabs a hold of a tree and he pulls it out of the ground. Before Guts can even react, Waleed swings the massive trunk, launching Guts into the woods. Everyone watches as Guts' body begins to fall between the branches and crashes back onto the ground. Casca begins to ride over to check, but before she can get to Guts, Waleed steps in her path, knocking her off of her horse. He tells her, "I thought there was only men around here." And then he reaches down to grab her. But before he can, a bolt flies through the air, landing into him. Casca turns back to see Judo with the rest of the Hawks, readying for a second attack. Waleed starts pulling the bolts out, shouting, "Whenever I get interrupted when I'm trying to kill something, I get really cranky." Using the trunk from before, Waleed starts swinging wildly, and he kills any Hawks in his path. Soldiers begin to flee, but before some of them can get a chance to get away, Waleed reaches out grabbing them, eating both of them and their horses. Blood begins to drip down his chest, and the soldiers stare in horror at what they've just seen. Judo gives the order for everyone to retreat, but while the soldiers flee, Casca tries to wake Guts up. She looks at Guts' lifeless body and starts to slap him, trying to snap him out of it. She shouts that she won't ever forgive him. He's not supposed to die in a place like this. He was supposed to take her away. Soon Casca begins to hear the ripping of trees, and she looks up to see Waleed. He tells her that he's sorry for keeping her waiting, and he reaches out for her. She tries to pull out her sword, but Waleed's arm grabs and picks her up. As he holds her, he tells her that she's about the perfect size, so let's take off this armor. Pieces of armor begin to fall to the ground and he starts to rip her clothing off. He goes on stating that bitches really shouldn't have any clothes on. This might hurt a little bit. His second mouth begins to open and a barbed tentacle tongue begins to slither out. The tip of the tongue opens up and Waleed says that this is going to make her feel like a virgin again. The tongue starts to rip away at the lower part of Casca's clothing and she screams out in pain, and in a flash, the tip of Guts' sword shoots upwards. He looks down to see Guts standing there with his sword piercing through Waleed's tentacle. Guts tells him that he better not be popping a boner right above his head. He swings down on his sword and the tentacle flies off, and Waleed begins to scream. Then Guts turns and cuts away at the arm holding onto Casca, causing Waleed to drop her. She looks around and Guts tells her that she slapped him pretty damn hard. Thanks to that, he's got some strength back. The rest of the soldiers begin to stare at the strength that Guts has, and Griffith watches, and he smiles. Guts tells Casca to stay back. She's going to distract them looking like that. But mainly, he wants to kill this thing one-on-one. Casca asks what is he talking about. There's no way that she can. But Guts stops and yells at her to shut up and get away. I'm gonna finish this with my own sword. As Guts stands there holding out his sword, he can feel his body clenching up. Will his sword really have any effect on this monster? There's only one way for him to go now, and that's forward. He charges at Waleed, dodging his swings, and then he thrusts his sword into the lower mouth. He pulls back and the sword ripping through the side of him, and Waleed begins to stumble. Then Guts swings again, this time at his legs. His massive body falls over and all of the soldiers cheer Guts on. With the cheers of everyone, Guts jumps up onto Waleed's stomach and he stabs downward. And as he's tearing away, Waleed leans back, grabbing Guts with both hands. The power from Waleed begins to crush Guts, and as he's finished, Waleed throws Guts into some nearby trees. His body bounces and skips across the ground, and then he begins to cough up blood. Seconds later, everyone watches as Waleed jumps into the air and he comes crashing down, throwing Guts away. But as Guts' body lands from a branch, Waleed says that he may have overdone that last attack. Guts asks himself, is this it? Am I really gonna die here? But he begins to think back to his training at the waterfalls. He remembers talking to the blacksmith's daughter Erica, and her asking what will he be able to do if he fought that monster again. He told her that he wasn't sure yet, and Erica asked, what will happen then? Guts' eyes open as Waleed reaches out to grab him, but before he can, Guts slides off the branch, slashing away at Waleed's center eye. He screams out in pain and he slams his giant fist down. But again, Guts cuts away at the hand and the hand begins to heal itself. Waleed shouts that he's sick of playing these games, and Guts picks up his broken and bloodied body and he asks, how will it be then? But with as much as Guts can hurt Waleed has hurt him just as much. And Guts begins to ask himself if he can even do this. Can he even win this fight? Waleed stomps down, pushing Guts back, and with the force of it, he sends Guts rolling backwards. At the rate that they're going, Guts' sword won't last through another hit like that, and then he notices one of Waleed's men dead next to him. Waleed walks through the woods asking, where did he go? I'm sorry that I got so mad. Just come out, and I'll kill you painlessly. But then Waleed notices someone behind a tree. He gets closer and he sees the body not moving, so he chops into the tree, and he notices the soldier, and then he notices Guts is attacking from above, and he punches upwards, except Guts was there. Now it's just a tree branch. As Waleed has his arm extended, Guts jumps from another tree, and he stabs into Waleed's hand. Waleed manages to snap the blade, but Guts doesn't stop. He then takes the broken sword and he jams it into the side of Waleed's neck. Waleed starts smacking away at Guts, but Guts manages to get around and grab a hold of Waleed's head, and he holds it in place. Using a dagger, he starts to slice into Waleed's upper chest and then into his eye. Waleed's body flails and he slams Guts into the tree, but Guts then loses his grip, falling, and soon, so does Waleed. Everyone watches and they see Waleed go down, and through the crowds, Casca begins to run towards him. She runs over to where Guts fell, and then her eyes begin to water. Tears begin to fall, but they're tears of joy. As Guts looks back, grinning, Casca leans down and she hugs him. Meanwhile, back in Midland Castle, Charlotte wakes up from the prison that she was taken to after the night with Griffith. She leans up and asks what happened to Griffith, and Anna tells her that it's been a day and a half, and there hasn't been any reports of the king catching Griffith. Charlotte leans back, stating, it's good then. Her father kept his promise. But in the back of Anna's mind, she can't tell her that the hawks are still being hunted. Charlotte then gets up from her bed and she opens up the windows to remember the night that Griffith came to her. She remembers the night of the attack and how Griffith said that he would return. But as Charlotte stares out of her window, she begins to see something. Is it a bird? Because it looks too big to be a bird. Meanwhile, over at the Hawks camp, Casca gets to work stitching up Guts from his wounds. She tells him that even though he may be stronger than he was a year ago, he still just swings his sword without even thinking like he always has. She goes off stating that they were supposed to retreat, but he kept on fighting, and Guts says that if she's so afraid of dying, why even fight in the first place? He feels the grip from Casca's hand on his shoulders start to tighten, and as tears fall, she tells him that he should just go ahead and die then. After angrily putting on the rest of his bandages, Casca and Judo leave Guts and Griffith to the rest. But before leaving, Casca looks at Griffith and tells him, welcome back. As Casca and Judo leave, Casca asks how bad is it. Judo remains quiet for a moment and then he tells her that his leg and arm muscles are gone. Even standing up or holding a sword, it's impossible for him. A little while later, the Hawk soldiers scout around and they look over Waleed's body. One of the soldiers looks down at Waleed's hand thinking that he saw something, but as he stares at it, he figures that he must be seeing things. Back at the carriage, Guts begins to laugh, telling Griffith that it's just like the time that they fought with Zond. Both of them got messed up pretty bad, but they somehow survived. Guts then says that if he wants, he can take the helmet off. It is just the two of them, but Griffith doesn't say anything. He then notices that Griffith is looking back at his old armor, and Guts asks if he wants to wear it. Griffith slightly smiles and Guts laughs, stating, you haven't changed a bit in the past year. Alright. He grabs the armor and begins to fit Griffith with it, and he tells him that this is a battlefield, and if you don't wear armor on the battlefield, then you can't do anything. Meanwhile, back outside of the camp, the Hawks guards begin to hear something. And as the two turn back, they see a giant mouth, and then a giant hand comes slamming down on them. Waleed starts to crawl, shouting, I don't want to die. Inside the carriage, Guts finishes the last clasp on Griffith's armor, and he shouts, here comes the White Hawk. Griffith reaches for his sword to pull it out, but with the loss of the muscles in his arm, he can barely grip the handle. Guts laughs, telling him that he can't rush just yet. It's been a year or so of course he's gonna have some trouble, but soon enough, he'll be able to swing his sword again. Suddenly, the two hear the guards screaming from outside and then a rumble on the ground. Guts opens up the carriage and a giant hand swings, knocking him away and destroying it. Guts and Griffith look up to see a bloody Waleed telling him that he doesn't want to die. Waleed reaches down and he grabs a hold of Griffith and he holds him into the air. Guts grabs the closest sword that he can, but Waleed tells him not to move and he begins crushing Griffith. Waleed says he can't be losing to bugs like them, and then he hears a roar in the distance. He then thinks that if he dies here, he'll be trapped in the maelstrom, and he yells to Griffith. Waleed tells him to call them out. Zod says that he's supposed to be the one. Use the Behelit! Call out to your guardian angels! Call out the 4 god hands! The rest of the Hawks surround Waleed, and Casca shouts for him to let go of Griffith, and he laughs, telling everyone how they don't even know anything. Their precious toy here has already been broken. Waleed starts to pull away at Griffith's armor, and as the pieces fall off, he holds out Griffith's body, telling them to look. Everyone sees Griffith's small and withered body, and Waleed tells them that he's so sorry, but they won't be following this guy anywhere. While everyone stares, Guts just watches as rage slowly takes over. Waleed once again tells him not to move. He can break Griffith's neck right here. But then he tells Griffith to go ahead and call them out. His vision is fading already. He looks at Griffith's body and he notices that he's missing something. He says that it doesn't make any sense. If he doesn't have the Behelit, then he's... Just then, Zod swoops in behind him. Zod's massive wings begin to spread and everyone looks up, and Waleed says that it's him. And then Zod's horn stabs into Waleed and he lifts him off the ground. The soldiers begin to panic as there are now 2 demons among them. Zod stares at Griffith and Waleed tells him to come on. They can do what they want. It's the only thing the disciples are told to do. He's even entitled to kill the man, even if he's the 5th one. Zod tells him,
Of course, and he is also entitled to tear you apart if he chooses.
Zod grabs him because to bend Waleed's body down with his horns, and Waleed screams out in pain. Waleed says,
We're on the same side, right? This guy doesn't have it, he's not the one.
And Zod tells him,
Either way, his trick of extending his life isn't going to work.
And then he rips Waleed in half. Guts catches Griffith, and as Casca runs over to check on them, Zod towers over them. He looks down to Griffith's eyes and he tells him,
It will return to your hands. That is its nature.
He then opens up his wings and he begins to fly up. But Guts shouts for him to wait. He has to ask him something. What is the eclipse? Does it have something to do with that monster monkey that they just fought? What about this death that he's unable to escape from? Zod looks down and he tells him,
You will know soon. Very soon.
And he flies off. Everyone watches as Zod leaves, and then a soldier notices something coming out of Waleed's body. Deformed creatures start to crawl and claw their way out. And as Guts watches, he realizes that those things are not getting out, they're being pulled in. A swirling vortex appears and all of the creatures are pulled down, as well as Waleed's demon body. And just as quickly as the vortex appeared, it disappeared. And all that's left is a single body, the human body of Waleed in his true form. The Hawks are now left to wonder, what was it that they just saw? The story is getting truly messed up, and doing that deeper voice for battles does definitely hurt me. But don't worry, I feel it's needed to demonstrate to the demons. Anyway, follow us on Twitter @MangaStory, and I'll see you guys next time right here.